For years, I told myself it didn't matter. The jokes, the little dismissive smiles, the way my own sister introduced me like I was something to apologize for. I kept showing up anyway. Birthdays, holidays, Christmas dinners where everyone talked over me like I was air. Every time. I thought maybe this year she'd see me differently. Maybe this year she'd remember I had once given up more than she ever would. But that night, when Valerie lifted her glass and called me our family's peaceful little civilian, the laughter that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard on a flight line. I smiled. I swallowed the heat in my chest and let her have her moment. But something inside me, quiet and long-suffering, finally shifted. I'd spent a lifetime earning silence. That night, I decided it was time they heard what silence sounds like when it finally breaks. They just didn't know yet whose silence they had broken. The drive back to Montana felt endless. Snow swallowed the road, and my old Jeep struggled up the frozen hills, its tires grinding through the silence. Each mile closer to home felt heavier, like the air itself remembered things I'd tried to forget. By the time I turned onto the familiar road, the house was glowing, strings of lights, laughter spilling through frosted windows. For a few seconds, I sat behind the wheel, watching the warmth from a distance, wondering why I'd come. Then I killed the engine and stepped out into the cold. Valerie opened the door. Perfect hair, polished smile, and that same tone she always used when she wanted to remind me where I stood. "Well, look who decided to come home. Thought you were too busy, fixing planes or something." I smiled lightly. "Merry Christmas." Val. Inside. It was the same as always, her voice carrying above the music, our mother glowing beside her, the house filled with the comfort I could never quite touch. I took a quiet seat by the fire, staring at the photo of my father on the mantel. Flying's easy, he'd told me once. Coming home, that's the hard part. Mom asked if I was doing okay. Still breathing. Still flying somehow. I said, that night, in my old room. I looked at my hands, rough, steady, and smiled faintly. I hadn't come back for love. I'd come to see if silence still made them uncomfortable. Valerie never missed a chance to perform. Her dining room gleamed like a stage, crystal glasses lined in perfect symmetry, silver cutlery glinting under the chandelier, white lace catching the light of tall candles. She sat at the head of the table, smiling wide enough for photographs, while Richard, her husband, lingered beside her in quiet reserve. His kind of silence wasn't shy. It was measured, analytical. Stories began to roll across the table. Promotions, ski trips, new houses, each tale more polished than the last. When the conversation finally circled toward me, Valerie tilted her glass, her tone coated in sugar. "So, Harriet, are you still working around airplanes? Must be peaceful, you know, doing civilian work." The word dropped heavy into the laughter that followed, sharper than the clink of cutlery. I let it settle for a heartbeat before lifting my glass. "Peaceful's good for some of us," I said. The quiet that followed was brief but deep. Then, as if cued, the laughter returned, forced, brittle. Only Richard didn't join in. His gaze fell to my wrist, to the old pilot's watch, whose scratched glass caught a flicker of candlelight. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in judgment, but recognition. Valerie went on, sweeping attention back toward herself. "Richard's been working with the Air Force. Drones, classified projects, all that serious stuff. Real work, not tinkering." "Careful," I murmured, my voice calm. "The line between real and quiet works thinner than you think." Mom looked down, the kind of look mothers give when they'd rather not choose sides. Valerie's laughter rang out, too bright, too quick. She didn't understand what I meant, and she didn't care to. Then one of Richard's colleagues, an older man with a voice made for war stories, leaned forward. He talked about a mission years ago called Northern Falcon, how his brother had been pulled out of a burning convoy by a pilot known only as Eagle 9. Everyone leaned in, intrigued. Valerie laughed again, saying it sounded like a movie. I set my glass down gently, feeling the echo of engines in my ears. The candle flame blurred into something hotter, brighter, an old memory roaring to life for just a second before I forced it quiet again. Across the table, Richard was still watching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The house grew still after midnight. I couldn't sleep. The laughter downstairs had faded into muffled echoes, replaced by the sound of wind pressing against the windows. I slipped from bed, took a flashlight, and climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. The air smelled of cedar and old paper, boxes stacked like forgotten decades. My light caught on one, its lid carved with my father's name, Henry Lawson. The wood creaked as I opened it. Inside were black and white photographs, oil-stained notebooks, and one thick envelope, edges yellowed with time. On the front, written in the shaky hand I knew too well, to my daughter, Harriet. I sat on the cold floorboards and unfolded it carefully. You never needed my approval. Harriet, you were born with more courage than I ever had. I know where you served. I know what you did. And I am proud, even if I never said it. The words blurred as I read. My breath hitched. He had known. The missions, the risks, the things I couldn't tell anyone. And he'd chosen silence, the same kind of silence I had lived inside for years. At the bottom of the box lay a faded document, Operation Northern Falcon, classified heroism under fire. My name sat at the corner in faint blue ink, capped, H. Lawson. I pressed my thumb against it, tracing the letters like a secret prayer. Downstairs, I could hear faint laughter again, Valerie's voice floating up, warm and bright, and so far away. She would never know what these papers meant, or maybe she already did. I folded the letter back into the envelope and closed the box. For the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I felt something sharper, clarity. Standing there in the dim light, I realized loneliness isn't born from being forgotten. It grows when you start believing you must stay hidden to be safe. When I went back down, the living room was still glowing. Valerie sat near the fire, laughing beside Richard. I stood by the window, unseen, and watched the snow drift past the glass. 17 lives once waited for me to bring them home through smoke and sand. Now I was the one standing outside, looking in, but somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache, a small spark began to burn again. Christmas night turned the house into a theater. Valerie glided through it like a host born for the spotlight, her red silk dress catching every reflection, her laughter timed perfectly between songs and compliments. Guests filled the dining room, neighbors, family friends, a few men from Richard's defense circles, all glowing under golden light. I sat at the far end of the table, quiet in a gray sweater, invisible by design. When Valerie raised her glass, the music softened. Her tone walked that line between charm and cruelty she had perfected since childhood. To family, to success, and to those who really make a difference. Applause broke out. Glasses clinked, smiles everywhere. Then her gaze cut toward me, sharp and sweet, and to my sister, our family's quiet little civilian. The laughter was instant. It rolled across the table like a ripple breaking glass. My hand tightened around the stem of my glass, but my voice stayed calm. To peace. We all need some of it. A bead of silence hung in the air. Valerie's smile stiffened. Richard didn't move. His eyes stayed on me, studying, calculating. Then Kellen, one of Richard's defense partners, leaned forward with the eager energy of someone who enjoyed hearing himself speak. There was this pilot years ago, codename Eagle 9, saved 17 men under fire, still classified. Whoever she was. They said she disappeared like a ghost. A hum of admiration circled the table. Valerie laughed too loudly. A woman? Please. Sounds like a movie. I set my glass down slowly, the candlelight flickering against its surface. I didn't laugh. I didn't speak. The memory of engine smoke and sand swept through me for a second, and then dissolved. Across the table, Richard was still watching, his gaze drawn again to my wrist. to the old pilot's watch, whose scratches glowed in the candlelight like tiny scars. His expression changed. Subtle, but telling. Valerie turned away, unconcerned. Her voice floating into another story about Richard's work with the Air Force. Drones, classified systems. Real work, not tinkering, she said with a practiced smile. Careful, I murmured, keeping my eyes on the wine. The line between real and quiet works thinner than you think. Her laughter filled the air again. She thought I was joking. When the dinner ended, she caught me in the hallway, that same condescending tilt to her chin. You should talk more, Harriet. People might forget you're even here. Sometimes that's the only way to survive a room like this. I said. She didn't understand. She never would. Through the window, snow fell harder, lights bending through the frost like refracted glass. The night wasn't over. Not yet. The house was quiet long after the guests had left. I stepped out to the porch, craving air that didn't smell of wine and ego. The cold sliced through me, sharp enough to wake the ache I'd been carrying for years. In my coat pocket, the small military radio I'd kept for no reason other than habit crackled to life. Static. Then a voice, deep, familiar, cutting through time. Eagle 9. This is Raven 2. You still there, Captain? For a heartbeat, I forgot where I was. The sound of that call sign dragged me back to another world. I raised the radio slowly, my breath fogging the air. Copy that. Raven 2. Eagle 9, standing by. The words slipped out before I could stop them. They felt natural, like breathing again after holding it too long. When I turned, Richard stood at the top of the steps, his coat half on, eyes wide, his face pale under the porch light. What did you just say? Nothing important. You said Eagle 9. I didn't answer. The wind howled between us, carrying a silence that said more than words ever could. His voice dropped, almost a whisper. My brother, he served in Falcon, the pilot who saved them. That was Eagle 9. Our eyes met. No need for explanations, no lies, no defense. Tell him I'm glad he made it home, I said softly. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The way he looked at me, half disbelief, half reverence, was enough. Inside, laughter burst again, Valerie's voice rising above it all, oblivious. I stepped back through the doorway, the warmth hitting me like a wall. Richard followed a few minutes later, his expression unreadable. I sat on the sofa near the tree, the lights blinking against the glass ornaments, across the room. Richard watched me, like someone seeing a ghost from a story he'd always thought was fiction. Valerie chattered on, unaware that the ground beneath her had just shifted. I smiled faintly, just once, letting the noise blur into the background. They called me a civilian. But tonight, someone finally remembered who I was. The next morning, the snow outside was falling thicker, softer, but the house felt sharper, filled with the kind of silence that waits for something to break. I sat near the window with a cup of coffee, the newspaper open but unread. Valerie's voice carried from the kitchen, clipped and tense as she ordered the maid around. The illusion of control. It was the only thing keeping her steady. Then Richard's voice came, calm but deliberate. Val, there's something we need to talk about. I barely looked up until I heard my name, Captain Lawson. The room went still. Forks stopped midair. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. Valerie turned, disbelief all over her face. What did you just call her? Richard didn't flinch. Captain, United States Air Force, call sign, Eagle 9. A fork clattered to the floor. Valerie gave a short, nervous laugh. You can't be serious. My sister changed oil and cleaned engines. That's it. Richard unlocked his phone, scrolling through files. Then he held it out to her. Read it. Captain Harriet Lawson. Operation Northern Falcon. Distinguished Flying Cross. 17 personnel rescued. Her face drained of color. I set my cup down, keeping my voice even. You went through my files? No, he said. I recognized your call sign. I just confirmed it. Mom rose, shaking slightly. Harriet, why didn't you ever tell us? Because I didn't need to be believed to know who I was. The air cracked open. Valerie stumbled back, hands trembling. Richard spoke again. Quieter now. My brother was one of the 17. He wrote a thank you letter, never sent it. Said his pilot's voice was the calmest thing he'd ever heard under fire. I looked at him, nodded once. Tell him I'm glad he made it home. When I stood to leave, Valerie shouted, her voice high and breaking, "You're humiliating me in my own house!" And Richard's reply cut through the noise like cold steel. You did that yourself when you forgot what respect looks like. Outside, snowflakes landed on my coat and melted away. For the first time in years, I felt light. The truth, once spoken, was heavier for everyone but me. By evening, I was back at the small hangar, the hum of engines and smell of fuel grounding me more than any family ever had. The sound of tires on ice made me look up. Valerie stepped out of her car, mascara streaked, eyes red. You made me look like a fool, she said. You let him humiliate me. I wiped my hands on a rag, not meeting her eyes. I didn't make you anything. Val! You did that on your own. She started to cry. Dad always loved you more, even after you left. He told me once. You were his real legacy. I turned, startled. When did he say that? Before he died. He left me a letter. The one you found in the attic wasn't the only one. She reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. Edges yellowed. Inside was my father's handwriting. You've always wanted to shine, Valerie, but some lights blind the ones they love. Her voice cracked. I hid it. I couldn't stand reading how proud he was of you. I wanted him to see me, not you. I sighed. He did. Val, just not the way you wanted. She hesitated, eyes pleading. Tell Richard I overreacted, please. I can't lose this. No, I said quietly. You built this yourself. Stand in it. A voice came from behind her. She doesn't have to. Richard was there, snow on his shoulders. He stepped forward, handed me an envelope. You should have this, he said. A copy of your commendation letter. It's been sealed for years. Inside, in faded ink, Captain Harriet Lawson, for exemplary courage beyond command. I smiled faintly. Beyond command. I like that. Valerie stood motionless in the snow, her pride collapsing. I turned toward her, voice steady. You don't owe me respect, Valerie. Just stop pretending I don't deserve it. She walked away without a word, heels sinking deep into white silence. Richard watched her disappear, then met my eyes. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs wants to meet you. He should. Maybe, I said. Snow drifted through the open hangar, landing on the old wings of a grounded plane. For the first time, I felt peace, not from winning, but from finally letting go. The airfield was empty when I returned that night, the wind howling across the tarmac like an old memory refusing to fade. The snow was falling hard, blurring the lights until everything looked like a dream half erased. I unlocked the hangar and stepped inside. The old Cessna sat in the corner, wrapped in a thin sheet of frost. I brushed my hand along its nose. Cold metal, steady and familiar. It felt more honest than anything said in Valerie's house. A car door shut behind me. Richard approached through the snow, his coat dusted white, a folder in his hand. You shouldn't be out here alone, he said. I've been alone most of my life. He placed the folder on the plane's hood. The golden seal of the U.S. Air Force caught the dim light. Your service record, he said quietly. It was sealed under Falcon protocol. I had it reopened. You deserve to see it. I flipped through the pages. Captain Harriet Lawson, call sign, Eagle 9. Distinguished Flying Cross, Operation Northern Falcon. A loose letter slid out. To the pilot who saved us when we had no chance. Your brother? I asked. He nodded. He's alive because of you. Tell him I'm glad he made it home. That's all that matters. Richard looked at me, his voice rough with something like awe. You didn't just bring them home. You brought me back to what honor means. Honor isn't what they print on paper, I said softly. It's what you do when no one's watching. He bowed his head, snow clinging to his hair. You don't need to salute me, I murmured. I'm not. He said. I'm just saying thank you, properly. For a moment, it felt as though every lost voice from Falcon stood there in the snow beside us, silent but proud. I looked up. Flakes drifted through the air, falling like ash over memory. Sunlight stretched weakly through the hangar windows, glinting off the frost-covered tools. I was wiping down a wrench when soft footsteps echoed behind me. Valerie stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. No makeup, no perfect hair. Just my sister, looking small and tired. I found the other half of Dad's letter, she said quietly. He wrote, Both my daughters serve in their own ways, one in the skies, one in the world below. I'm proud of both, though neither will believe me. I put the rag aside, meeting her eyes. He was right about that. She smiled faintly. I spent years trying to prove I was better. Turns out I didn't even know what you were. You don't have to, I said. Just stop defining me. Her eyes glistened. Mom wants to see you. She knows everything now. We walked outside. The snow shimmered under the sun, almost too bright to look at. Valerie's voice trembled. I didn't hate you, you know. I just couldn't stand being invisible next to you. Then maybe we both know what that feels like. I said. Later that morning, Richard's message arrived, an invitation to the veterans' ceremony. I hesitated until Mom called, her voice breaking. Please, Harriet. Come this time. Let people see what I should have seen all along. I looked at the Eagle 9 badge on the table. Its metal worn but shining. All right, Mom. Just this once. The ceremony was held in a grand hall in Missoula, all white light and quiet dignity. I sat in the last row, wearing my old uniform, the fabric crisp but softened by time. My hands rested calmly on my lap as names were read aloud. Captain Harriet Lawson. Call sign, Eagle 9. I rose to my feet. Applause swelled around me. Richard stood beside my mother, who was crying openly. Valerie sat frozen, her tears tracing a quiet confession. Walking toward the stage, I felt the light hit my face, warm, clean. Nothing like the stage glow of Valerie's house. The host handed me the medal and asked softly, Would you like to say something? I looked out into the crowd, my family, my ghosts, my sky, and said, I'm still a civilian now, but that doesn't mean I stopped serving. For a heartbeat, silence filled the hall. Then came the sound of hands meeting, louder, rising, alive. Valerie stood first, clapping through tears. I bowed my head, not out of modesty, but because, for once, I was seen. Through the window, a C-130 crossed the Montana sky, leaving a white trail that shimmered like memory, for the ones who never made it home. I whispered,